And now, a fireside chat with former U.S. Chief Data Scientist DJ Patil and Radha Basu from iMerit.
Hi, everybody. Good to be back. And I have a very interesting speaker joining us. I'm really glad to welcome one of the most influential data scientists in the world, DJ Patil. DJ was appointed by President Obama as the very first US data scientist. And he was tasked with making the largest organization in history, the US federal government, a data-driven enterprise. What's great about DJ is he comes with such a vast corporate experience, and he loves about talking about connecting the dots between data science and practical societal applications, a true thought leader. Welcome, DJ.
Thank you for having me. It's awesome to be here and sad that we still can't connect in person, but I'm glad we're doing this.
Yeah, I mean, next time, DJ, you and I are going to sit in the same room and we're going to do this together, right?
I hope so.
You know, what I really like about your approach and your thought process is the fact that you look at this in the continuity of data science, prototyping, building, engineering, and that's how AI is going to get into societal applications and into production. During the University of San Diego commencement that you gave to the graduating class of data scientists, I think it was last year. It was last year. You shared that data scientists should prototype for 1x, build for 10x, and engineer for 100x. And a lot of data engineers and practitioners on this at the summit. So what are the key elements as we think about going from this whole model-centric to data-centric, which to me is a continuum, do we need to consider to truly scale AI application from proof of concept to full-scale production? Mm-hmm.
Yeah, it's remarkable. So the quick, very backstory of this card was, you know, I wrote these notes on this card and I posted the image when I was in the White House, and it kind of has taken a life of its own. It's gone viral, and it's like a lot of people have really found it as a model for building. I won't get into the whole details, but it was kind of coming up as like trying to help figure out how are we going to actually build solutions in the criminal justice reform space, policing transparency. And we're trying to figure out like, how do you use data in novel ways? And in that approach, what we realize is we need to kind of go back to our old adages of how do we actually make things work? And the idea is, well, you got to start with experimentation. We don't know what's going to quite work. And so that's this idea of prototyping at 1x scale. And then as soon as we're like, oh, this is starting to work, we go to 10x. And then we start building it at 10x. And then finally, when we realize it's really working, and now we got to engineer it. And, you know, the version of this is maybe play with spreadsheets, then get a database. And then now you've got to put in some serious architecture and infrastructure to scale and manage costs and ensure, you know, your SLAs and all the other things that are critical. What I find is essential, especially when we get to AI and ML kind of applications, is the prototype phase is often we don't think about the situation holistically. It's easy to prototype in this very narrow, small thing. And then, you know, you start to build a little bit more and then the wheels fall off the bus. And then you kind of go back to prototyping and figuring out. And then you finally get to the next phase where you're engineering and you got to kind of start over again. It's this iterative process as we build it out, especially since we have so many dependencies. And you know, Radha, you know this better than almost anybody right now, as you guys are the ones building and helping so many organizations with this, is it's a whole ecosystem that has to come together equally at 100x scales to make this work. And that's the challenge ahead of us right now.
I totally agree, because as we look at, you know, we thought of the amount of data, solid amount of data, and training machine algorithms, the model-centric piece, right? And you think of how much data there is. And then as these are going to, we call it like these 6 or 7 phases of the ML DataOps. NVIDIA described this very beautifully. And you talk about the training of the machine algorithms. You build it, you validate it, you QA it, and then in like take AV, it goes into mapping. Then you build the maps, then the vehicles go out on the road, and then you get this flurry of data where you're starting to look at what are the edge cases. And we used to think, oh, edge cases, that's an edge. Remember, we jokingly talked about me being called the edge case CEO. And then you think, oh, that's going to be 10%, but it's a whole lot more because it's all these real world situations. That's what then really defines how you engineer and get this, and it's an iterative process. In this view, the future of AI will depend on high quality data. High quality data and the processes. You know, not the sexiest words, quality, process, but the most important, how do we find efficient ways, tools, processes, and principles to be able to prepare the data we need as we start to get AI from that prototype phase into really the build. In many cases, we're in build and engineer it to go into production. Some of your thoughts on this as we look at this whole end-to-end approach.
Yeah, it's one of the things that people, I think, are often surprised by is why I spend so much of my time on just opening up or working at the data layer rather than on the algorithm model layer. And one of the conclusions that I've come to is that the biggest performance lift, the biggest benefit is actually on good quality data. And then the ability to build the product in a way that helps elicit better quality data and makes it a forward feedback cycle where the ecosystem is constantly getting better. Let me give you a concrete example where it's extraordinarily frustrating right now, where we don't have data, but we should. Cancer research. You know, we have data all over the place. We have unbelievable amounts of data, but it's siloed across all these places. We can't bring it together. And that's just at the national US level. At the international level, if like the results or the solutions that may be out there is painful that we may already have the solution and we just can't bring the data together. So what would it look like if we able to actually pull those data systems together, open that up, but also ensure that we do it with all the things that are important to make sure that it's done with equity, inclusion, benefits everybody, no harm is done. That whole ecosystem fundamentally starts with data, and then you can layer and add on the other ecosystems to this. But if you don't have that data stuff, we're always hamstrung. We're always hamstrung. And all the examples that I have dealt with, you may be able to get away with a lot through the model, but at some point the edge cases are going to crush you and limit your performance and the ability to deliver a solution, whereas a little bit of better quality data would take care of it. And so I've just found that over and over again to why I over-index to the quality of data right now.
In your experience, can you share a little bit more kind of some examples? I will tell you why I'm asking. As you know, we are very much involved. We have this whole AI and Med. It's a pod that we work with, and people heard some of the healthcare panels that took place earlier. And as we work with, we've done cancer cell categorization, more at the prototyping stage, and you find that especially in AI and Med, and I think it's true of many other applications, that in some of the disease cases, what might work in the US and some of the models we're building may be different, as you say, from the bias and from the kind of populations as you may be building it, even in ultrasound images, as you may be building it for South Asians. So this becomes, it's like voice, like speech to text, very different with the different accents, even if everybody's speaking in English, even between male and female. And so the model-centric, the models being built around a whole set of, and being able to be end-to-end, and being built around a whole set of different inputs to it from data, but then also looking at the data and saying, what is that data here that's the highest quality? It's also being discerning about data. So I wanted to get some examples from you, or at least for you to talk about this, and we will then lead into the role of humans in this. So let's keep
it's a great
going.
way to tie it together, because the thing that I think about a lot is, how do we put nuance into the situation? And you're right. Like, in one case, we may have a model that works within one population is terrible in another population. And we've seen very recent examples where this has gone completely off the rails in areas like predictive policing and some forms of educational assessments, other types of things where this just hasn't worked. As we make more data open and we're able to evaluate these things, the edge cases are really about nuance. It's almost one of these things where the blind spots are super obvious. I think of this example of, she's now just graduating from college, but when I first got to know her, is this woman, Grace Clark. Grace Clark grew up in this neighborhood in New Orleans, pretty underserved area. She's Black. And she was working with the police department because they'd started to open up their data. And she's opening up the data, and there's this amazing photo of her, which I love, is she's with the superintendent of police, which is like the chief of police, and she's showing him how to type, and he's got these big, thick fingers, and it's like he's fat fingering everywhere, and she's just like showing him, and she's in power. She's in the power position. And she pulls up this data about like how often things are happening in the police department with the community. And he says, that can't be right. And she just says, well, it's your data. And you sort of sit there and you think, here you have this power dynamic, all this different thing. And this kid at the time, she was a kid at the time, is able to challenge the whole situation because she's asking a question. So how do we open up data to allow the engagement of questions? And part of this, what we're not good about right now, is using the algorithms combined with data and with humans to get richer questions. Sometimes the algorithm may, the model may show us something that we didn't expect, and that leads us down to something very novel that we did not appreciate. Maybe it's sometimes a human who says, have you thought about this? And we go, does that exist in the data set? Are we blind to it? Do we have bias in it? Did the model kind of miss something? How is this? How do we think about this holistically? Until we get this whole ecosystem working, I fear that we are not going to get the best out of this overall system.
Yeah, very true. Just as a matter of information, we have an AI delivery center in New Orleans. And we put it there for two reasons. One, because of the diversity of the population and the diversity of employees we can get, but also that they're very young employees from different backgrounds, and they could be skilled into becoming some of the experts in the loop of AI, which kind of leads me.
Actually, let me just touch on something because you said something I think really important. I think it's great that you're doing this. At the national level, what you see large governments realizing, especially in healthcare, is the genetic diversity. The edge cases are what are going to drive the value proposition. If you look at the national security environment of how companies think of it, it is what they're looking for is to identify the edge cases and go, ooh, that's interesting. In the case of finding new disease treatments, all those things, it's like, for those that haven't tracked something like Henrietta Lax's story, which is the HeLa, stem cell line, that's that little bit of nuance, that one thing that was an outlier is what gives us all these other cures. And everybody wants that single edge case. Like the identification edge case is what's going to power us to not the 100x scale, but the 1,000 or 10,000x scale. And we haven't gotten our head really around that, which is what we typically do in our old school science model methodology. And so I think we need to kind of rethink those portions is one of the things that I'm excited about, especially in the healthcare pharmaceutical delivery space.
Well, pharmaceutical as well, which is another area, but the healthcare space we're very familiar with. So this brings up actually my next 2 points, which are kind of intertwined. The promise of end-to-end delivery of AI will require a new application of jobs to successfully deploy data operations and monitor machines. You know, my background, I know a lot of the network management stuff and, you know, monitoring and looking at nerve centers and using that as a way to be able to monitor these systems. And when you kind of think about AI in production and going towards actually to the field, it becomes more and more evident that humans in the loop, experts in the loop, this hybrid human-machine interface and the role of humans in artificial intelligence, machine learning, the entire transformation is going to be, is today and going to be very important. This is why in the pandemic world, you know, the pandemic year, we created close to 1,500 jobs in this field. So how, in your mind, are humans the key to unlocking the highest quality data? And how will we open it up for innovation? Because to me, this is I say often, we're in the first baby steps of the last mile for successfully deploying AI, because we've done all in a particular area, and we happen to work a lot in the autonomous mobility space besides, you know, the AI med and things. So what is your view in terms of this unlocking of data, which leads to the edge cases, the innovation? Where will that come? Yeah.
The thing that I think about the most of all of this is how do we unlock curiosity? Like, when people talk about like what is the best training you can have for a data scientist, data engineer, or analyst, anything, I think the fundamental thing is curiosity. You know, we used to give the first interview question I used to give always at LinkedIn for the team members was, I give you all of LinkedIn's data set. What are you interested in knowing? Like, you've got it all. And it was almost always binary. Like, people would give me like, well, what are the questions you're interested in? Kind of answer. Or they'd be like, oh, I want to know about this, 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 this. And they would just go on and on and on. I'd be like, wow, that's actually a really great list. Like, hold on, like I gotta take notes kind of thing. And we need more of the people who are questioning things, because as they question things and they have that curiosity, and it's curiosity over judgment, it creates an ethos inside, a cultural ethos of, I wonder what if we did this, or how about this? And that unlocks more data. It unlocks people trying and experimenting with the models. It asks questions like, how do we ensure the technology works for us rather than against us? It asks all these other things that open up the space rather than nothing. And very often, a lot of culture in a lot of places, corporate cultures do not like that, because they're very like, let's just get the deliverable, let's get it on and move on. And what I find is, as if you get that sort of working, the rest of it takes care of itself. And the fundamental reason I think all these job titles are coming up, especially with humans in the loop, critical thing from the data scientists all the way through the engineers and all the ones that are yet to be titled, is because of the curiosity. The person, he or she, they are able to come up with an insight that radically changes the course or trajectory for the organization. Radically. And Radha, I suspect you guys are doing this, but it's like every once in a while you get that one moment and you're like, hold the phone. Everything's got to change. Like this is changing the whole paradigm. Let's redo this whole thing.
You know, people listening to us might think that we had pre-planned this, but we haven't. The reason I say this is the curious learner is at the center of something we built called the Academy. And the Academy is around really bringing out critical thinking, critical curiosity, learning, and bringing these together because we feel that the phase we're in not just the labeling and the annotation and stuff, but as we go into the quality, the monitoring, the questioning, especially edge cases. That's why we say the edge caser is the curious learner in the center of the Academy. And what you say is so true because there's such a long tail of complex edge cases that need to be solved. And it's by workflows, it's by pods or application areas. I'll give you an interesting one that this is about smoke. So, you know, we had all these use cases and the parameters around that was, okay, there's exhaust smoke, there's this, there's et cetera. And a person came up and said, I can think of at least 8 or 9 other kinds of smoke. And the data scientists who were on Slack, they were talking to, was like, no, not really. I think we could all categorize them. And she, coming from a very different background than the data scientists, was able to convince them to create a whole new set of workflows around smoke. And it could be smoke from the fires. It could be wisps of smoke that the clouds look like. And these are really critical. When you're looking at, let's say, drone delivery or drones landing, you need to know the difference between those things. We ended up having a set of workflows that were just parameters earlier, but an actual set of workflows around smoke or related stuff. And it made such a difference in looking at different autonomous mobility in bad weather conditions, black and white conditions, even in being able to do image processing and enhancement, pre-processing of the images that came out of this whole discussion or this curiosity around smoke. Or
such a good example, right? I mean, that codifies so well the notion of nuance,
yes.
Right? Fog versus people who are barbecuers know the difference between black smoke, white smoke, and blue smoke. Like there's so much there, and the lift and the performance benefit is there. I remember when we were building LinkedIn Skills, Pete Skomarach and Monica Rigatti pointed this out, which is, what's the difference between a skill and an experience? And I remember this moment going, oh, you guys just broke my head. Like, what is that? Is like, you know, working in a region or on a problem, is like, which is it? And we went down this whole really deep path. It took us like weeks. And when we started pulling on this thread, and what it did do is it changed our whole thinking around these kind of what it takes to actually make sure, in a LinkedIn case, what are the skills and experiences that lead you to a place that you are going to be able to be productive in the workforce. And that's like, because I love that example, is like, the question I think everyone has to ask is, how do we unlock this cultural element? How do we have platforms that help support us asking the richness? How do we take this back to that principle of 1x to 10x to 100x? All those kind of aspects need to, like, that is a challenge ahead of us as we try to build and engineer these things.
Yeah, we work with a lot of languages, even in languages and nuances. And, you know, when we start to do speech to text, or what's called audio is the new AI, you know, and audio is the new UI of AI, they say. And so those kinds of things, sounds and these visual aspects. One of the things I really like in speaking with you, and that's for me very important as well, is looking at AI and its societal applications. I want to make sure that we're not 5-10 years from now talking about the AI divide. I want to address that divide now, and there never to be an AI divide. You've said as practitioners, we should dream in years, plan in months, evaluate in weeks and shift daily. We even shift every shift, you know. So as we go into these broader societal applications, share with us your thoughts on this and your thoughts on how we will always, we will design from now to not have an AI divide in the broad societal space.
Yeah. Well, maybe let me start with the mission of the U.S. Chief Data Scientist, because I think it's a good framing. And I think it applies for all of us. The mission statement of that office is very carefully chosen. It was chosen not just with President Obama, but the whole staff to buy in to say this is what, and it is effectively to responsibly unleash the power of data to benefit all Americans. And I think we can easily say our mission should be to responsibly unleash the power of data and AI to benefit everyone. Responsibly, key word, benefit everyone. It should work for all people. Right now, we already have the divide. The divide is already happening. Part of our job right now is to ask, how can we use AI to lift up those that don't have opportunity, that don't have access to their data, or don't exist in the system? You know, women don't exist in clinical trials at the same rate that men do. How do we ensure that they're in part of the data sets? We have to start doing that. We have to culturally ask ourselves, how do we ensure that we are making this technology work for everybody, on behalf of everybody? And we're not marginalizing people, because that divide is not just going to benefit a few people. It creates societal imbalance that is destructive for everybody. And I know we don't have time for this, but if you're interested, Hillary Mason, Mike Lukides, and I wrote a book that is free out there on data and ethics, to how to culturally do this. But what I would encourage everyone to start doing is to ask the conversation of how we're going to do this. Because Radha, my hope is, like, when we're actually able to sit down together in the same place, we're going to go, you remember back when we were talking about this? Geez, how silly were we? Because look at how much progress we've made since then.
Yes.
And we'll have all these new people who have come up with curiosity and phenomenal, interesting ideas that are going to carry us forward in a better way.
Yep. And that will make AI ubiquitous. And just like the mobile has touched every person, so will AI, because it's such a broad set of applications. DJ, I know we're out of time. I could be speaking to you for a very long time. Really appreciate your coming on to our summit and sharing your thoughts. And I truly look forward to our working together in the future to make this absolutely a reality.
Thank you. Thanks for having me.